In the history of philosophy, no philosopher, in my opinion, has been so important and so influential as Karl Marx. There were many philosophers before him, and there have been many since him. Some of them made remarkable contributions one way or another, as I have pointed out in many of my videos. But none of them has exerted so much influence as Karl Marx, and on so many areas, such as philosophy, economics, politics, sociology, history, and so on and so forth. What made Marx more remarkable is that his theory, which formed the basis of Marxism, turned the whole world upside down in a way no other philosopher had done. The impact of Marxism is still being felt in many parts of the world nowadays. Karl Marx truly accomplished what he was determined to do when, as a young man, he wrote, "Philosophers have so far only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it." His intellectual capacity, his insight for critique of capitalism, his unique perspective of history, his analysis of social classes, and in particular, his determination in changing a world that he saw as unjust, make me think of him as one of the greatest thinkers, if not the greatest thinker of all time. Hello, and welcome back to my channel, and welcome to another video. If you are new to this channel, my name is Frank Zhu, and I'm a college professor teaching sociology, history, and philosophy. I'm also an award-winning landscape photographer. This video is another episode of what I now call a video series titled Think Like a Philosopher. Today, let's talk about how Karl Marx did his thinking and how he distinguished himself from other philosophers. That is, how he went beyond interpreting the world and aimed at changing the world. When Karl Marx was a young university student, he already set himself apart from other students by displaying a strong interest in observing and understanding society. Unlike his fellow students, who took everything for granted and only studied for profitable careers in the future, Marx examined the world with a critical eye and engaged himself in the study of society. As he examined society, he found it unfair and full of injustice, where rich people became rich by exploiting the poor. He was determined that this unjust world needed to be changed. Initially, he was studying law, but philosophy was more appealing to him now because he believed only philosophy could help him achieve his goal of changing the world. So, despite his father's wish that he become a lawyer, he switched from law to philosophy. As a philosophy student, Marx engaged himself in deep thinking about the corrupt establishment and got himself actively involved in student movements. He saw himself not merely as a student, but also someone with a bigger role to play, with a goal to achieve. Unlike many other philosophers who were obsessed with abstract thinking and out of reach with real life, Marx was a practical philosopher. For him, philosophical problems arise out of real-life conditions, which can only be solved by changing those conditions. So, a philosopher's job is not only to come up with a theory, but he must also know what theory is good for what conditions, and he must also know how to apply his theory to urgent social issues. To prove his own theory, Marx not only observed carefully the ongoing social movements, but he also took part in those movements by writing articles and helping organize trade unions, for example. In addition, he did a lot of research for his theory. During his stay in London, he spent almost every day sitting in the British Museum, studying reports on factory conditions, data on industrial production, and all kinds of statistics coming from the real world. He was always searching for solutions to problems that existed here and now. Marx was different from most other philosophers in another aspect. While many others were elitists of their times, well-bred and well-fed, Marx was down to earth and close to ordinary people. He lived most of his time in poverty, and he knew what real life was. He insisted that human beings must first eat, drink, and have clothing before they could pursue politics, art, religion, philosophy, or anything else. Any discussion of beauty, wisdom, or freedom is meaningless if you don't have a home. According to him, the economy in the society is the foundation for everything else, including political institutions, legal framework, etc. Economic changes are the driving force for social development, from primitive society to ultimately communist society. This idea is the essence of Marxist historical materialism. To change your society, you must first start with changing the material foundation of society, including the forces and relations of production. According to Marx, the decisive power of economy also determines individual behavior. Such philosophical materialism set him apart from many idealist philosophers who only believed in the power of the mind, such as Immanuel Kant and Friedrich Hegel. As a materialist, Marx emphasized the importance of material conditions in shaping social, political, and cultural aspects of human life. To put it simply, where you stand on social and political issues depends on how rich or how poor you are. The poor and the rich view the world in completely different ways, which is a major reason why conflicts arise. In Marxist terms, these conflicts are called class struggle because they are a result of class differences. Take stealing, for example. When you own nothing and you are starving, would you tell yourself that stealing is a crime and therefore you'd rather die than steal a piece of bread? On the other hand, if you are a property owner and you are afraid of poor people stealing from you, would you say stealing is not a crime? Marx said, laws were created by the rich and powerful. So, stealing became a crime only because the rich used law as a tool to prevent the poor from becoming rich. When the poor realized this, they will rise up in arms to change the system, that is, to have a revolution. Speaking of revolutions, Marx was perhaps the only philosopher who enthusiastically advocated and participated in political revolutions, because he saw revolutions as a necessity to change the world. For him, revolutions in capitalism were inevitable because class struggles could only be resolved through revolutions. Capitalism would thus be overthrown, and in its place, communism would be established, according to Marx. And that brings us to another point which made Marx different from other philosophers. Marx was also a man of action. with a clear goal of changing the status quo. Throughout his life, Marx actively took part in revolutionary activities. Right after graduation from university, Marx worked on many revolutionary newspapers and magazines in Germany. When he was exiled to Paris, Marx took an active role in the French revolutionary movement. He and his friend Friedrich Engels joined the Communist League, which was an international revolutionary organization. Marx and Engels wrote many articles for the League. As a matter of fact, the famous Communist Manifesto, which was a political pamphlet, was written for the League. The manifesto was a call to the working class people, asking them to rise and revolt to overthrow the old establishment. When Karl Marx was forced to move to London, he did not stop supporting the working class movement in Europe. He was a leading figure in founding and guiding the International Workmen's Association, the so-called First International, which was formed in 1866. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, Marx was not only a great thinker in philosophy, but he was also a great sociologist, although he never called himself a sociologist, a term rarely seen or heard in his time. His insightful analysis of the relationship between social classes is hugely important in sociology. In my opinion, as a professor of sociology, his most important contribution to sociology is the so-called conflict theory, which is one of the most influential sociological theories and which I use frequently to analyze social issues in my lectures and research. Unlike many other sociologists who emphasize the social consensus, Marx viewed society as full of competition among different groups for limited resources. He emphasized the role of coercion and power in producing and maintaining social order. Social order and stability were not maintained by consensus as the other sociologists claimed, but by domination of one social class over another, according to Marx. The rich have control over political, economic, and social resources, with which they dominate the poor. As a result of different access to these resources, conflicts constantly arise between the rich and the poor. That's why his sociological theory is known as conflict theory. Well, that is all for today. As always, thank you for watching this video, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.